Did you know that dust from the Great Salt Lake contains arsenic and heavy metals? I did not. I didn't. I know now. I know now. Uh, Clean air is infrastructure, and infrastructure costs money. I'm not getting into whether it should cost money or not. That's an entirely different topic. What we know at the moment is clean air costs money. Infrastructure for clean air costs money. I love sipping with my girls. Okay, so this is week 8 of 52 bills. Still doing this. Gonna show up. We're doing 52. This week, we are looking at a state House bill out of Utah. Why would this be important to talk about nationally? Well, Great Salt Lake in Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. It is a terminal lake. That means water flows in, but the water does not flow out. Water, the things that come in with the water, the things that come in from the surrounding areas, whether that be because of geography of the area, whether that be because of agriculture in the area or things that the state has chosen to do, such as mining, etc. When the water stays in the lake, the consequences of those things stay in the lake. If water leaves the lake through evaporation or other climate reasons, there is less water, which means there's less mud, which means that the dirt dries out and the lake bed is exposed. And when the lake bed is exposed and it is dry, it becomes dust. Dust rises, and dust does not stay local. That actually goes national. So if toxic dust from a shrinking lake does become airborne and then travels across the country, let's talk about that in terms of our responsibility around something like that happening. It's fascinating because also right now I'm reading Tales of Militant Chemistry. It is by Alice Lovejoy, and I am thoroughly enjoying it, learning a whole lot, and also learning a whole lot about fallout. Fallout from nuclear testing that happened in Nevada and traveled across the United States to have fallout in New York. I'll have a review on the book soon. You can go find that at northwestprogressiveinstitute.org. So in thinking about this bill that showed up about Utah, this is a Utah bill, and it is not about lake beds drying up. This bill is HB, House Bill 247. It allocates revenue from Utah's brine shrimp royalty. Okay, what is brine shrimp? Brine shrimp eggs means dormant, early stage brine shrimp embryos encapsulated as cysts that are harvested from within the state. Tax year means a 1-year period beginning on February 1st and ending January 31st of the following year. This again goes back to the concept when I say literally how we live our lives is governed by the policies that are in our government, in our legislation, written in words, codified in law. They have definitions. They have very specific definitions about what a thing is. And you can't get around those just because you find something out in the wild. So let's read the actual bill and its changes. This is on the Utah legislative website directly, and they have it listed in a way that is very friendly to be able to read through. So this is where we're going to start because this is the substitute bill that has been proposed. Proposing the substitute bill, Great Salt Lake Funding Amendments. 2026 General Session, State of Utah. The chief sponsor is Raymond P. Ward. We don't have a Senate sponsor listed. This means it does not have a companion bill at the moment to be a companion from the House to the Senate for the state of Utah. General description. This bill addresses funding of activities that benefit the Great Salt Lake. This bill directs revenue generated by the brine shrimp tax to the Sovereign Lands Management account instead of the species protection account, provides for how the revenue is to be spent, and makes technical and conforming changes. There's no money appropriated in this bill. Other special clauses, the bill provides a special effective date. This is really nice how they have this listed. The Utah Code sections affected amends these specific pieces of law. So for us to be able to go and click on these to see where they are, this would be able to show us where these are directly, and we can see those being amended. Okay. Be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Utah. Section 1, Section 23A-3-214 is amended to read, this is the new thing, Special Protection Account Reporting. There is created within the general fund a restricted account known as the Species Protection Account. The Species Protection Account shall consist of revenue remitted by a county to the Division of Finance in accordance with Title 17E, Chapter 4, Part 2, Species Protection Funding Act, or Section 59. Okay. And then these are being moved down. So this was taken out. The update is tax revenue deposited into the Species Protection Account in accordance with Section 59-24-105. Tax revenue collected in accordance with Title 59, Chapter 33, wind or solar, electric generation facility capacity tax, revenue collected in accordance with Title 79, Chapter 6, energy protection assessment, and interest earned on money in the Species Protection Account. Money in the Species Protection Account may be appropriated by the legislature to develop and implement species status assessments and species protection measures, obtain biological opinions of proposed species protection measures, conduct studies, investigations, and research into the effects of proposed species protection measures, verify species protection proposals that are not based on valid biological data, implement Great Salt Lake wetlands mitigation protections in connection with the Western Transportation Corridor, pay for the state's voluntary contributions to the Utah Reclamation, Mitigation, and Conservation Account under the Central Utah Protection Completion Act, pay for expenses of the State Tax Commission under Title 59, Chapter 23, Brine Shrimp Royalty Act, which that might be a really good one for us to go and look up. So the brine shrimp royalty, it does say a person shall pay for each tax year a brine shrimp royalty of 3.25 cents multiplied by the total number of pounds of unprocessed brine shrimp eggs that the person harvests within the state during the tax year. This is very clearly defining where revenue is coming from if you are someone who is harvesting brine shrimp in the state of Utah and getting that revenue back to the state of Utah to do some things with. And what are we trying to do some things with? That goes back to the bill. HB 247, the proposed specified in subsections 3A through 3D may be accomplished by the state or in an appropriation act. This legislature may authorize the department to award grants to political subdivisions of the state to accomplish these purposes. Money in the Species Protection Account may not be used to develop or implement a habitat conservation plan required under federal law unless the federal government pays for at least 1/3 of the habitat conservation plan costs. Fair. The division shall report to the Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Environmental Quality Appropriations Subcommittee no later than November 30th, 2026, concerning the amount of revenue deposited in the Species Protection Act under each revenue source outlined in subsection 2, and how the division spent the money deposited. The fiscal note. Fiscal notes are really important because they tell us what sort of monetary change is this bill going to be bringing up. And which is really important, people pay taxes. And it would be great if people had a receipt for the taxes that they paid, right? Where does my money actually go when I pay into a tax system? I'd love to know that. So a fiscal bill, when we're talking about changing, moving money around, where is that money going? That's what we are going to be looking at here. So when we look at the financial changes to the bill, what we are seeing is a direct move of money. So the total revenues don't change, which means tax funding doesn't change. They're just simply taking the money from special protection, here, GFR, and they're putting it over into sovereign lands management, GFR. So we have enactment of this legislation likely will not result in direct expenditures from tax or fee changes for Utah for residents or businesses. It's not a new program, no new regulatory burden. Okay. Section 2, Section 59-23-4 is amended to read Brine shrimp royalty rate, commission to prepare billing statement, deposit of revenue. A person shall pay for each tax. So this is what we were just reading over in what's actually in law, and now what they're wanting it to say in law. A person shall pay for each tax year a brine shrimp royalty of 3.25 cents. That hasn't changed. Multiplied by the total number of pounds of unprocessed brine shrimp eggs that a person harvests within the state during the tax year. A person that harvests unprocessed brine shrimp eggs shall report to the Division of Wildlife Resources the total number of pounds of unprocessed brine shrimp eggs harvested by that person for that tax year on or before February 15th, immediately following the last day of that tax year. The Division of Wildlife Resources shall provide the following information to the Commission on or before March 1st, immediately following the last day of tax year. The total number of pounds of unprocessed brine shrimp eggs harvested for the tax year, and for each person that harvested unprocessed brine shrimp eggs for the tax year, the total number of pounds of unprocessed brine shrimp eggs harvested by that person for the tax year, and a current billing address for that person, and any additional information required by the Commission. We're almost there. The Commission shall... I'm only laughing because I'm only giggling and laughing because this is really how things work. This is really how things work. They get put into laws. Now, there's people that go outside of those laws and move things around and say, well, can you change this for me? I have this money. I don't want to have to go through all of that process. But honestly, what people do, because these processes are so intense and have to keep up with, you have to have a tax lawyer. You have to have estate planners. You have to have people that prepare your taxes for you. Again, this isn't the episode for is that okay or not. That's not what we're talking about. But this is why most of the things that happen in and around our life are around taxes, and they're in law, and whether they're codified or not depends on how these bills change and what gets passed. And who passes the bills? Legislatures. Who are legislatures? The people that we elect to put into office. So why is it important for you to know who your state and federal legislatures are? Because they're the ones who are taxing you. They're the ones who are deciding what is going to go into law or not into law. Yes, the IRS is there to make the taxes happen, but the people who are approving the tax code and voting on the tax code that impacts your life are the people that you put into office. Whether you voted for them or you voted against them or you didn't vote at all, that is how this happens. That is how this happens. And sure, there are the ways that there are bribes around this and the system lockouts and like two parties primaries. There are all of the things that make it very, very difficult to have better representation in our elected officials that even get to a place to even have their name on a ballot for us to even vote on them. That is another separate conversation that I can tag a video to and why we would want to change that process over there. For the process that exists right now today, this is it. It's not a ton of really sexy, glamorous things that are going on in here. This is harvested, unprocessed brine shrimp eggs and getting revenue money from those, from the people that harvest those. And that impacts the amount of water that could be in the Great Salt Lake. And the amount of water that could be in the Great Salt Lake impacts the air quality that you or I have in states that are nowhere near Utah. We got to go back and finish reading the bill. The commission shall prepare and mail a billing statement to each person that harvested unprocessed brine shrimp eggs in the tax year by March 30th, immediately following the last day of a tax year. And clues, hello, the commission, if a commission is preparing and mailing a billing statement, each person that's doing this, that means people have to be employed by said commission to prepare and mail a billing statement, which means that a commission has to be funded, which means that's probably out of tax dollars because this is for a whole government. This is a government entity. You see how that? You don't get a statement mailed to you unless there's a person that does that, and that person doesn't do it for free. That person's hired by that commission, and that commission has to pay them. So the amount of funding that goes to said commission, that's the loop. This is where I really want to highlight more of why government should not be so inexpensive if we want them to be doing all of these other things. If we want them to be doing these things that help us, if we want them to be giving us a receipt about what's going on, if we want them to have an updated legislation site where it does show what's changed in a bill that's been proposed, those are not free. Those are not free services. Nobody's doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They are making money on it. They're being paid. This is somebody's job. That's somebody's job. They're being paid to do this. So you and I have more information about what's happening in our world. The billing statement under subsection 2CI shall specify the total number of pounds of unprocessed brine shrimp eggs harvested by that person for that tax year, the brine shrimp royalty that that person owes, and the date that the brine shrimp royalty payment is due as provided in section 59-23-5. In accordance with Title 63G, Chapter 3, Utah Administrative Rulemaking Act, the Commission may make rules prescribing the information required under subsection 2B3. Revenue generated by the brine shrimp royalty shall be deposited into the Sovereign Lands Management Account created in Section 65, created in Section 65A-5-1. Section 3, Section 3, 65A-5-1 is amended to read 65A-5-1, Sovereign Lands Management Account. There is created within the general fund a restricted account known as the Sovereign Lands Management Account. The Sovereign Lands Management Account shall consist of the following: the revenues derived from sovereign lands, except for revenues deposited into the Great Salt Lake account under Section 73-32-304. That portion of the revenue derived from mineral leases on other lands managed by the division necessary to recover management costs. Revenues derived from the Great Salt Lake Preservation Support Special Group License Plate created in accordance with Title 41, Chapter 1A, Part 16, Sponsored Special Group License Plates. Fees deposited by the division, amounts deposited into the account in accordance with Section 59-23-4, and amounts deposited into the account in accordance with Section 59-5-202. The expenditures of the division relating directly to the management of sovereign lands shall be funded by appropriation by the legislature from the Sovereign Lands Management Account or other sources. Money in the Sovereign Lands Management Account may be used only for the direct benefit of sovereign lands, including the management of sovereign lands. In appropriating money from the sovereign lands management account, the legislature shall prefer appropriations that benefit the sovereign land from the money from which the money is derived, unless compelling circumstances require that money be appropriated for sovereign land other than the sovereign land from which the money is derived. Almost there. The division shall use the amount deposited into the sovereign lands management account under subsection 2E as follows. The division shall expend $125,000 as directed by the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, created in section 73-32-302, for the benefit of the Great Salt Lake. And B, the division shall expend the remainder of the amount deposited under subsection 2E to benefit the Great Salt Lake by I, leasing a water right for water to be deposited into the Great Salt Lake, or funding a project that directly benefits or maintains the health of the Great Salt Lake brine shrimp population. Section 4, effective date. This bill takes effect on July 1st, 2027. So here we go in the very last bit. By either having and funding a project that directly benefits or maintains the health of the Great Salt Lake brine shrimp population, and or leasing a water right for water to be deposited into the Great Salt Lake. So adding more water or protecting that population of shrimp which needs the water. And why it matters because the lake bed being exposed deposits heavy metals and arsenic into the air that the rest of us breathe, who don't even live anywhere near Utah. So let's contact our legislatures. Are you ready? Let's go. Okay, let's go back into Digital Democracy Project and let's get into the Kealo discussion for pros and cons for this bill. All right, so some pros, and we've been talking about them a little bit maybe throughout the way. Some pros specifically from the Kealo discussion. Ecological health is prioritized, which can enhance wildlife habitats and maintain biodiversity, crucial for environmental stability. Economic benefits may arise as preserving the Great Salt Lake supports local industries such as tourism and brine shrimp harvesting. Redirecting funds to the Sovereign Lands Management account ensures focused resource allocation for the Great Salt Lake conservation efforts. All right. And those that are saying, I don't know that we want to do this, what are some of the costs to make this change? Local communities reliant on initial funding programs could face reduced support and protection, affecting livelihoods and ecosystems. The legislation may see opposition from groups that believe the current allocation supports all the necessary ecological protection efforts. Reallocating funds away from the species protection account may impact broader conservation activities previously supported. And these are quite interesting, and I think the bigger thing to call out is, why is something like this needed? And that's not specifically talked about in the bill, right? That's not being brought up in the bill itself. I'm not seeing that here in this communication around pros and cons. So we might need to go a layer deeper. And the layer deeper is, there is no deeper. The water is drying up. Let's take a look at that. And getting into scientific journals, if someone was like, well, the Great Salt Lake is shrinking. And then scientists are like, well, let's measure that. Is it shrinking? American Meteorological Society. Scientific journals is a great place to start when we're talking about something that we want to find evidence facts for. The Great Salt Lake fluctuations are attributed to water diversions and have been magnified by recent droughts in the region as one of the largest worldwide terminal lakes, terminal meaning water goes in, but it doesn't come out. Another study, impacts of the Great Lakes on regional climate conditions. This is by Robert W. Scott and Floyd A. Huff. This was published in 1996, and specifically the abstract, estimates of lake-induced spatial changes of 6 climate variables were derived for the entire Great Lakes Basin. These patterns are estimated by a comparison of maps. So we can verify that there are changes around in and around a lake by looking at scientific studies that have been done on the Great Lake. The shrinking Great Salt Lake may exacerbate droughts by reducing local precipitation. And this is a case study. This one was done in July of 2024. It was printed for publication. This one has free access for us to be able to get into. This would mean that scientists, researchers have gone and done testing on to prove that the Great Salt Lake is shrinking, and then seeing there are impacts for everyone else around because of said shrinking. They have to find that factually true. So in these studies where we're finding the Salt Lake is shrinking, what impact does that have on us? Potential impacts of the shrinking Great Salt Lake water body on the local hydroclimate system are poorly understood. This was from 1990. Changes in lake levels, salinity, and the biological community of the Great Salt Lake of Utah. So that means we have measures of the lake from a specific time period, and they can measure against that to see where the lake is now. Don't sleep on scientific journals. Also, you can get a lot of these for free at your public library. So that's something we can talk about another time. None of this is being put into and discussed yet in the actual law of moving the money around. That isn't to say that organizations who are looking to move the money around don't know about these facts. Let's talk to VoteBot about contacting our representative here. Let's ask VoteBot, why should I care about the funding for Great Salt Lake? Why the Great Salt Lake funding matters. Environmental health. The Great Salt Lake is a unique ecosystem that supports millions of migratory birds and other wildlife. Healthy water levels help prevent toxic dust storms from exposed lakebed, which can harm air quality for communities. This is throughout Utah, but we know from other sources that it can travel much further. Economic impact. The lake supports local industries, especially the brine shrimp industry and recreation, which is boating, tourism, etc. Jobs and livelihoods in the region depend on a healthy lake and its resources. Wildlife protection. Brine shrimp are a crucial food source for birds and are also harvested for commercial use. Targeted funding can help maintain healthy brine shrimp populations and protect other species tied to the lake. Community well-being. The lake contributes to local recreation, culture, and natural beauty. Water management decisions affect everyone in the region, from public health to property values. What the Great Salt Lake funding amendments in HB 247 would do shifts brine shrimp royalty funds from a general species protection fund to a fund dedicated specifically to the Great Salt Lake, ensures $120,000 is spent as directed by the Great Salt Lake Advisory Council, the rest going to projects that raise lake water levels or improve brine shrimp health. Focuses on resources where they can have the most direct impact on the lake's health, wildlife, jobs, and community recreation. So we've read this. I want to contact my representative. I want to contact my representative. Provide me a statement for, against, and neutral on this bill. Absolutely. Here are some statements that you can use. Fantastico. This is fantastic. So now I would want to take these statements in support, why I'm in support, why I'm in opposition, or why I am neutral. I think it would be actually really, really helpful to figure out how, if you don't live in Utah, how you would connect with a bill like this, right? So you guys already know, if you go to Ballot Ready, you put in your address here, and you would be able to then, because this is in the House, you would need to put a zip code. But let's say, you're in Salt Lake City, Utah, and you need to find out, meet your representatives, and we're doing state government. Here we go. If you're in Salt Lake, your Utah House representative is District 22. This is the person that you would want to reach out to. You can reach out to other people in the state. Oftentimes you see governors have very specific opinions on bills, lieutenant governors do, auditors, treasurers, all of those people show up and lobby for or against specific bills. So you could reach out to anyone there in your state and also your specific House rep and ask for this bill to come up for a vote, to get out of committee, to come up for a vote, to be on the floor. That's a really fantastic way that you as a person who is in Utah and able to vote in Utah, registered person in Utah. If you don't live in Utah, how could we get involved? If we don't live in Utah, how could we get involved? There are activists and organizations who are concerned with the Great Salt Lake who would need letters of encouragement or funding or other states to be involved in and wanting to support the Great Salt Lake. Federally, we could be wanting to derive and have funds go to the Great Salt Lake because of how it supports our entire United States overall. So in that sense, it would be ideal for someone to look up what is the Great Salt Lake Commission? Oh, there's a Great Salt Lake Commissioner. If you have suggestions on how to save the lake, you can input those here. You do not have to be someone who lives in the state of Utah. You can say, I actually have a thought. It's just your contact information. What we could actually put in here, VoteBot, reframe my support statement to be a suggestion on how to save the lake. Let's take a look at this. I believe dedicating brine shrimp royalty funds specifically to the Great Salt Lake is a crucial step towards saving the lake. By using these funds to raise water levels and support projects that improve the health of the lake, its brine shrimp population, we can protect wildlife, local jobs, and public health. I encourage you to support targeted funding and explore additional solutions that prioritize the restoration and long-term sustainability of the Great Salt Lake. Okay, so that's one way that we can get involved as someone who doesn't live in the state of Utah. Maybe I want to add a little bit of additional information as to what I've also talked about with you guys. Okay, so now we could have a statement that is more specific to regions outside of Utah and how you believe that impacts the environment. Now, let's say that is not your take on this situation and you think, why are we even wasting time having this bill? You could ask VoteBot. Maybe you want to say, I think they should do something else to save the lake. This is not it. This is wasting some time. Why are they making this bill very specific about changing where that money is coming from? Why can't they just take it out of the locations of the funding that they already have? And maybe that's the opinion that you want to take and you want to share back about saving the lake or sending to a legislature. You could say something like, I do not support this bill, and here's why. That's totally fair. And VoteBot is going to help you do both because, again, VoteBot Digital Democracy Project is a nonpartisan, nonprofit that is available for you to use. And it should be able to, in the VoteBot messaging, be able to bring multiple things to the front for you to then take with an observant lens, look at for yourself and say, oh, yeah, I can see why we need to make some changes, or there might be changes, but these aren't it, or we don't need to make changes at all. That's completely up to you. Just because you don't live in Utah doesn't mean that a bill like this doesn't impact you. And I'm not saying everybody has the time to go through other states' legislation. That's what I'm here for, just highlighting and bringing some things to your attention, because maybe it will help you think about what legislation and regulations are about the lakes that are in your state, in the place that you live, in the environment that you enjoy, to be more focused on what is in the law that is impacting how I live and that's around me, because that is where things happen. It is in the laws. That's where changes take place. Air doesn't stop at state lines, right? And neither do the consequences of water mismanagement. So when a lake dries up, the bill does not stay in Utah. That actually moves across the United States. And that's why a bill like this matters. There is so much more that would need to be done. And that is the work of democracy. And that is the work of people in policy. And that is the reason why we hire, I'm telling you, you hire a legislature. That is the reason why we put people in office. That is the reason why we ask them to do this for their job. Because what we find that power, when not regulated and not accountable, is more abusive to our systems and our earth and those around us. But what we have seen over time, clean air is not automatic. Clean air that was once clean air and very quickly become not clean air. And to keep it in a clean space, because people and companies just don't do the right thing because they want to, you have to regulate it. And that has to be funded. And that has to be protected. And so when we underfund our ecosystems that we need for survival, someone else has to pay for that. And we usually find that more in vulnerable populations who didn't understand what the air was that they were breathing anyway. And that takes me back all the way to Tales of Militant Chemistry, which I need to go finish reading and write a review about. Might suggest that the Great Salt Lake is everybody's responsibility. This has been Coffee and Calculated Curiosity. I am your host, Cassie Clayton. Thank you for taking a sip with me.